Howdy, welcome to the Maze MasterCast. I'm your host, Ben Wiggins. It is, as usual, a beautiful day in Aggieland. Our guest today is Sarah Stuber, and we can't wait. What's the most interesting thing about you? I mean, there's a lot here, but from off the cuff.
That's a hard question. I mean, probably that I moved around a lot and done a lot of different things.
Yeah. How do you think that informs your journey? How does it make your journey most unique?
I think it's that I've gotten to see and work with people in different stages of life, different areas of the country, different perspectives that have kind of informed how I think about things and kind of given more precision and diversity to how I approach things and think about people in new places. So.
Yeah. Is there a place that showed up recently, or where was there a situation recently where you thought, oh, I remember that Frederick in Michigan asked a question this way 4 years ago, and now I want to handle this situation differently?
Well, I think it's more of just when I show up to a new place, I feel like I've done this before. And when I show up with a new group of people, there's people that you're thinking, maybe this is not where I'm going to be comfortable. These are not the type of people that I would necessarily connect with. But I've seen through different situations that kind of getting below the surface and being able to find things that you have in common. And some of those people have become some of my best friends over the years. And so I think I see that happening now when I'm in new situations and saying, let's kind of get beyond just the initial surface interaction and see what it is that we have in common. And so that's because you're kind of forced to do that. As I was a military spouse for a while, that's constantly the world of people and kind of changing over and meeting new people. And so I've learned to be more comfortable with that. I'm a natural introvert, so being able to actually go and meet people is sometimes hard, but I've learned how to do it.
Walk us through your academic journey.
So from an academic perspective, I started my undergrad and master's degree at Clemson University. I actually grew up in Clemson, South Carolina, about a mile from campus. So spent my early life there. Actually wanted to go somewhere different for school because I grew up there. I was like, I want to go somewhere different. But Clemson, the heartstrings drew me there. And so I spent my undergrad and master's degree there. And then I went to Charlotte, North Carolina for about 2 years. And worked at a public accounting firm there in Charlotte, working on financial institutions, doing a lot of different things, but wanted to kind of get back on a college campus. When I was at Clemson, I just loved being a part of the university community. So I took a job kind of on a whim at an athletic department in Minot, North Dakota. Didn't know a soul in Minot, and I was like, well, I'll do their business and operations accounting in North Dakota. So I took a job, went off to North Dakota, and spent an academic year up there. Decided that wasn't really what I wanted to do, so I actually went back to Charlotte, back to the accounting firm I was with in Charlotte. But while I was in North Dakota, I met my now husband. So after we dated for about a year, we got married, and I went back to North Dakota. I may be one of the few people that's voluntarily moved back to North Dakota twice in my life. And then from there, spent about a year and a half while my husband finished up his military service. He was in the Air Force, which is why he was up there in Minot. And then moved to East Lansing, Michigan, where I did my PhD at Michigan State University. So I was really blessed to fall into a great advisor, great situation at Michigan State.
Go Spartans.
Yeah, go Spartans. So.
Is that what they say?
They say go green, and then you respond, go white. So there's
okay. Yes. Because here, people like new coaches will show up here and say go Aggies, and we have to educate them a little bit on that.
Yeah, I had to be taught on that. Like the go green, go white is the correct response.
Understood.
Yes, yeah.
I wonder how many schools are just go whatever, and how many do a riff on it.
I don't know. I feel like there's definitely a right way to do it at each school. I think most have some kind of weird twist on it of some sort.
You got 2 bachelor's degrees,
I do.
Accounting and finance, and you got those at the same time?
They were staggered. So one was 1 year, one was the next year. Clemson doesn't do a double major, so it was 2 different degrees.
And you did some work with the athletic department there. Mm-hmm. And did anything noteworthy come out of that?
So my work there at the athletic department was in the video services. So I filmed highlights on the sidelines of football games, different events. We did the internet broadcast, so I got to call different games, things like that, which was a learning experience. A lot of sports are easy to do the play-by-play announcing. Some are very difficult to do play-by-play announcing for. So I got a little bit of experience doing that, which was fun.
What were your signature lines?
I don't know if I had a signature line. I wasn't that creative.
Oh, okay.
But I do know that swim meets were very difficult for me to call. I don't know anything about swimming, so I had to do play-by-play for a swim meet one time, and no one told me which lanes anybody was in. So I'm like, that person's swimming faster than that person.
And the person in the black suit
yes.
is swimming faster than the person in the green suit.
That's pretty much how I felt with
okay.
that. So,
fair enough.
But then also as part of that, we as part of the senior day at Clemson, we got to participate in the senior day activities. And I don't know, I'm assuming a lot of our listeners are football savvy. I don't know if you're familiar with the tradition at Clemson of running down the hill.
I've heard of it.
It's a pretty big deal around Clemson. I'm a little biased. I think it's one of the most exciting entrances in college football.
Right.
But we got to run down the hill as part of with the football team as part of that. And rode the buses around the stadium, got to run on the hill. I was all excited, lifelong Clemson fan. And I promptly face planted on the run down the hill about halfway down in front of 80,000 people.
Glad you're okay now.
Yes, yeah.
Did your foot slip or what?
No, so
Did
the
you
hill,
trip?
there's a little bit of misnomer. See, it looks like it's a nice, smooth, flat hill. It's really not. So in my defense, it's steep and then it gets flat and then it's steep again. And my foot caught on the flat part. And I'm not the first person to fall. I had a lot of the players come up to me after like, hey, we've tripped on the hill before. I was like, yeah, but is there video evidence? I don't know.
You moved to North Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
You touched on this earlier, but tell us the whole sordid story.
I guess probably the more exciting time was I worked in the athletic department the first time in North Dakota, kind of figuring out tickets, things like that. The second time I went back, I worked with a public accounting firm up there. So I got to audit a lot of different clients. And I don't know if you're familiar with kind of the Western North Dakota economic world, probably not. But they were a big part of the fracking boom.
I do know a little bit about that.
Okay, so I mean we're in Texas, so I think people know about the fracking.
Yeah,
so that was a big thing in North Dakota when I was up there. I was up there in 2013 onward, and so a lot of my clients were out in the Western North Dakota oil fields, which is the wild, wild west. You drive out there, there's just man camps everywhere. You couldn't get hotel rooms.
So they're what?
They're called man camps.
Fair enough.
They're just like little barracks that they set up out in the fields of North Dakota so people could find a place to live because there was nowhere to live.
Right.
We actually paid almost twice for apartment rental in North Dakota as I was paying in Charlotte. There was nowhere to live up there because of the economic boom.
Okay.
So I would go into restaurants, often be the only woman in the whole restaurant. It's up there, a lot of oil guys, things like that. So we audited a lot of different clients. They did different things. One of my clients he had no idea how to manage a business, but there was so much money to be thrown around that he was just making money hand over foot, but he didn't realize he needed to pay taxes on his money. So we had to have some of these kind of discussions. But he actually, for one point in time, was like one of the largest landholders in the state of Montana, but he didn't know. It was a crazy world of just people doing different stuff. A lot of money up there to be made.
Listeners of the Maze MasterCast, if you make money, just assume that you have to pay taxes on it.
Yes, yeah, that's my
reference.
professional advice as a CPA. You have to pay taxes
right.
on the money that you make.
Pay taxes.
You have a guy that's making $1 million a quarter, has that kind of business, and you're talking to him. He's like, "What do you mean I have to pay taxes? I've already spent that money." I'm like, well, "That's not how that works." So, but yeah, it was an experience getting to audit different kinds of clients. One of my clients, actually, the owner of the client was featured on a Dateline episode. For hiring hitmen in the oil fields. Fortunately, not the audit team. He was not trying to take out the audit team, which we're thankful for. But I learned a ton when I was out there. And so I bring in a lot of those kind of examples when I teach. I think my students think I'm making some of it up because it was just some of the crazy stories of what we do.
Why would someone want someone killed in the oil field? Is it just rival company, or
I think
what's
it was
the
actually something about
like
somebody marrying his daughter. Like I actually think there was something with that.
Oh,
like it was
so like
more
real
like internal
TV
family.
show type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was. Yeah, I mean, it was something about like a family relationship, and then maybe they did have a shared business venture at some point in time. Like it was something like that. It was not related to the company I was auditing. It was he just owned the company that I was auditing. So
I see. I worked on a movie in 2009, and the movie actually rolled. Mm-hmm. So the union came in and took the movie over, like the crew unionized basically. And the line producer was a good friend of mine, and he told me a story. I was not in the room when this happened. That he went into the executive producer's office, and this guy's an oil wildcatter also. So he walks in, and the guy's he says, "Hey, you can't really stop this from happening. Like the crew has unionized at this point. They've made the decision. And the executive producer opens his desk drawer, puts out a pistol, and like, I forget the name that he used, but he said something like, well, Bertha says otherwise. I was like, that's definitely a top 5 professional story for me.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
and I wasn't even in the room.
It's a crazy world. We had a restaurant one time, and somebody pulled a gun on somebody behind us over like ketchup. I'm not even kidding. They were like, you can have the ketchup. Like it was that kind of thing. Just like pull a gun out. Like, all right, I would like the ketchup now.
And kick his behind,
Yeah.
Seabass. Okay, then Michigan.
Yes.
Tell us about Michigan.
Yes. So I ended up at Michigan State. Once my husband finished up his service in the Air Force, he was going to go back and get his degree on the GI Bill. He wanted to do a degree in construction management. So we needed a place that had an accounting PhD and a construction management program, and Michigan State fit that bill. I probably should have had a more sophisticated method of choosing where I got my PhD, but that's where we landed. And
go green.
Go white. And and it was a fantastic place for us. Like we loved our time in Michigan. I was blessed with a phenomenal advisor. We had a great community of friends and people up there. And so it was a really special time for us. Just kind of getting our education together, having those memories up there in Michigan with our friends there. We also had our first child in Michigan, so it's a special place for that reason as well. But it was a really formative time for me in terms of learning how to think like an academic, moving into a different mindset like an academic, and thinking more carefully about a lot of different things. And so it was a great time for us up there.
Okay, and more about that.
Yes.
So thinking more carefully about different things, thinking like an academic. Are you talking about in terms of something's not real unless it's statistically significant, or what does this mean to you?
Actually, you probably learned that a lot of things are statistically significant that may still not be real, I think is actually what.
Well, yeah, one in 20 times you're going to run into it by accident.
Right, exactly. Or if you get a big enough sample size, you can find significance all sorts of places, right?
Yes.
I would say more of it is just being more precise in how we think about things. I think a lot of times people can, and I'll do this too at times. You kind of be lazy in your thinking, not necessarily following through a logical path. And I think academia has a way of challenging the thought process. And you say A equals B, but really, how does that work? Like, what is that? Are you really saying A equals C, and then you also have to have B and D in the middle and things like that? So you have to have different. Like it's just challenging the connections along the way and really pushing me to think more carefully when I'm forming arguments, thinking about projects and things like that. Is there
an example you can run through quickly that would make sense to a silly lay person?
Well, I would say so. For example, one of the things that I work a lot in banks, so I do a lot of research in banks.
Okay.
And so one of the things that I'm looking at now on a project is we're saying, well, if you come in, you have an auditor that's really strict. Well, the bank's changing what they're doing. So we can see that from a statistical relationship. Auditor's really strict. A bank is changing what they're doing, but in a way that we wouldn't necessarily expect. They're changing how they're making loans. And so then as an academic, you can step back and say, well, that's a relationship that's there. So the auditor's causing this loan change. Well, but that's probably not exactly how this is working, right? So when you dig into, you have to kind of tell a story. So I'll have co-authors that'll challenge me. They're like, okay, well, what's the extra link there? So really more the link is that the auditor's, tightening down in this area. They're tightening down on, how much discretion a client has in a certain area. Mm-hmm. And so that client's going to respond by trying to recapture discretion in a different area. So we're actually seeing a response to the auditor's behavior. Responding in one space is actually having an unintended consequence in another area, if that makes sense. So kind of really trying to think about how all those connections fit together, sort of the intermediary story. In academics, and we have a good way of telling each other when what we're saying doesn't make any sense. So I'll have these co-authors that I'll tell a story to. They're like, that doesn't make any sense, Sarah. Like you gotta be more precise. You gotta be more careful when you're thinking through those things.
And then you say back to them, so if you tell your kid they can't have ice cream now, but they want to watch Blue's Clues later.
I actually try some of this logic on my 5-year-old, but I think sometimes he's better at it than me. Like he'll think through the process. He'll be like, but Mom, if you said this, but now we're doing this, then what happened in the middle? Where's my ice cream? Kind of in the middle. So he'll call me out on the process.
How often do you retreat into because I said so?
I try to avoid it, but sometimes that definitely comes out. It's like we're doing this because that's what I'm in charge, and we're going to stop asking. We actually have to take question breaks sometimes at our house because my 5-year-old's very inquisitive, and I like to encourage the questions, but sometimes I can't go any further down the rabbit hole of why.
Yeah,
you run into that with your kids.
We're not quite there yet.
Okay.
Brielle will turn 3 next month, and maybe some kids get there by this age, but she's super sharp kid, but we haven't really gotten into the vortex of why. Let's see. You talked a little bit previously about struggling in early success with publication. What was that like for you? How did you experience that?
Well, I think when you're starting a new job as a tenure track professor, everything is about publications. That's what everybody makes a big deal about. So there's a lot of stress, I think, in the initial phases of figuring out what does that look like? What does it take to publish a paper? And there's a lot of luck involved in the timing of the process as well. I mean, you work hard, you try to produce a quality product, but there's still always a little bit of luck involved in, is the referee going to like it? How are things going to work? So I think that's always a little bit of a tough time, especially in a field where it's either publish or you're out, right? So you have 6 years to make a certain benchmark, or otherwise you've got to uproot your family and move across the country and do something different. So there's definitely a lot of pressure there at the beginning of that. But I've been really fortunate with some phenomenal co-authors, working with people that are very, very smart, very good at the careful thinking that I was talking about, and learned a lot from them to be able to. The
ice cream Blue's Clues thinking.
That's right, the ice cream Blue's Clues. They can get you there, which is, I mean, there's a lot of ice cream that gets eaten in this process as well.
I'm sure that's true.
There's some of those days you just need a pint of ice cream, right?
Have you tried the new HEB flavor? I think it's cookies over Texas.
Oh, I haven't tried that one yet.
So Bluebell's cookie two-step.
Oh yes, that's my favorite Bluebell.
So to me, there's not enough Oreos.
Okay.
There's maybe a little too much cookie dough.
Okay.
And HEB tries to balance that out.
Okay,
in
so they
Cookies
flip
over
it.
Texas. I feel like they did. It's not perfect yet, but I think it's a step forward. I won't call it a step up, but a step forward from Cookie Two-Step.
Okay. Well, Bluebell ice cream is maybe one of the top 3 reasons I'm at Texas A&M, because I came on my interview and the professor that picked me up actually took me to HEB, which I'd never been to an HEB, and I saw the wall of Bluebell ice cream because I grew up in South Carolina and we had some Bluebell, but the plethora of flavors in Texas of Bluebell ice cream is pretty impressive. I took a picture of the wall of Bluebell and sent it to my husband. I was like, we have to live here. There's 15 options of Bluebell ice cream.
Yes.
So
sometimes more than that.
Yeah. I mean, they switch them out. I don't think we have the seasonal flavors in other parts of the country. I'd never seen some of these seasonal flavors that come through. So I think it's a Texas thing. Yeah.
Okay, that's one of the reasons. What are the other ones?
Well, I think the top 2, it'd be hard to order them, right? But certainly one of them was just the culture at A&M. I grew up, like I mentioned earlier, in Clemson. I love the traditions of, Clemson University has a lot of traditions. It's got a military heritage. So when I came here for my job interview, I walked around the campus. I was like, this feels like home. This feels comfortable. And I actually texted my husband. I was like, I hope they give me a job because I want to come here. So that was one of them. And probably the second reason was the students here, actually. So when I was going through the interview process, I interviewed at schools kind of around the country, different places. And as part of the interview process, you go and you have office visits with different faculty members all day long. It's kind of like a gauntlet of interrogation by faculty members. But here, just about every office visit I went on, the faculty members mentioned, we have the most amazing students. They said they're respectful, they're engaged, they're hardworking. And we just have phenomenal students here. And that stood out to me because all the other schools I went to, nobody said anything bad about their students. Just no one said anything at all. And it was something that was really distinct here. So those would be the kind of the culture, the feel of the place, the students, and then the Bluebell ice cream. I don't know what the order would be, but that would be kind of where what the drivers were.
I would love to believe that that Texas A&M students are like that. There's something special here. I wonder what influences, and I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. I wonder what influences student behavior the most in terms of producing like great students while they are students. Does that make sense? Sense where I'm going?
Yeah, I think that there's, certainly just the level of respect that the students have for the professors and how they interact with us is distinct. I teach Accounting 327, which is one of those classes that students are sometimes a little bit nervous going into. And so I'll have students that'll disagree with me or they'll be worried about something, but the way they do it is always with a lot of respect, a lot of kind of, even if they're not happy with the response that I give them of, no, you can't retake that quiz or you can't do those sorts of things, the way they interact with me has just a baseline of respect. And I think with that type of foundation, they're more receptive to the learning and the challenges that come up in the classroom. And it's almost like there's more of a mutual trust perhaps between them and the the faculty member that they know that we're on their side, and so they're willing to listen and learn with what we're telling them. At least that seems to be my experience here, that the students are unique and engaged and want to learn. So
you're working with talented co-authors. You're playing the Ice Cream Blues Clues game, but what do you think was your biggest breakthrough in terms of, okay, so it's careful academic thinking. You talked about that earlier. But was there anything else that you feel like was a kind of an aha moment for you in terms of publication?
I think for me, that was working through, my first publication was based on my first year paper in my PhD program. And so working with my advisor on, I think there's kind of a black box in the academic world of, like, when you're a PhD student, you learn how to write papers, but the referee process, so once you submit a paper to a journal, they either tell you, no, go somewhere else, this is no good, or you have to revise it and you have to write this whole response to all of their questions. And that's an art form in itself. And so I think for me, seeing my advisor work through that and working through, like, how do you respond to comments? How do you manage some of these things was super helpful for me in understanding kind of, okay, this is how this process works, and this is what it takes to get down to that next level in terms of getting papers through the process. I also think there's a piece of seeing the more I spent time talking with other academics and understanding what it takes to figure out what the actual big question is in each project. Because sometimes you can find, like I'm talking about, you can find some of these associations. Well, A is associated with B, but well, do we care? Like, why do we care about that? And really seeing what is the kind of next step of the big question. What is it that people are really interested in? What has policy implications and things like that? And I still am not sure I'm very good at it at times. I think there's always a lot of guesswork in what are people going to find interesting. But I think trying to both see how to get a paper through the process and then asking bigger questions and more careful questions.
How much is, I don't know if there is a typical career, but how much is the typical researcher's early career shaped by their dissertation?
Well, I hope mine isn't going to be too much because I haven't been able to get my dissertation published yet, so I don't know. But I think but I do think that it is somewhat, it's at least very much shaped by your dissertation advisor, who your PhD advisor is. And like I said, I was very fortunate to have an advisor that was phenomenal. She challenged me, but kind of knew how to engage and teach in the process. But my dissertation, though, at least I actually looked at the effect of kind of fracking on banks in the oil field. So it was very much came out of my experience in North Dakota. And so at least it shaped kind of the trajectory of my interest in looking at banks and researching in the banking area. And so then it kind of gets, it sets the trajectory for the types of things you would study in the future, if that kind of makes sense.
Okay, so suggestion for the next round of submission on the dissertation, just title the dissertation "Fracking Banks."
There we go. I should.
That's the answer. You're welcome.
Yeah. My husband has suggested, like, you know, hookers and hitmen stories from the oil field, but I figured that wouldn't probably get me. That probably wouldn't get me through the referee. I mean, it might get people to read the abstract, but then they were probably pretty disappointed because it's not really about either of those things. But
right? You could. I'm trying to
maybe I could
figure
do
out
a
if there's
title
a way
and a
to
subtitle of it, like your subtitle, and then we're just gonna
Fracking Banks, hookers and hitmen.
There we go. I like it.
Welcome
I'll
to
try
the
that. I'll let you know.
MasterCast.
I'll let you know how that one goes.
In all of that process, you talked about giving birth to your first child in North Dakota. Work-life balance as you do all of this. What's avoiding the sort of the obvious pieces? It's difficult to do one versus another. Time management's really important, unless there's like specific nuances of those. But what do you feel like you understand? What do you disagree with people on in terms of work-life balance?
I think the biggest thing that I would say I disagree with people on is probably that you can do all the things and you can do all the things 100%. Because I think that's just an unrealistic expectation. I think sometimes people like to say that, or people like to portray that, the Instagram, the social media presence of like, look, I'm, rock star, mom, I'm rock star researcher, I'm rock star, all of these different things. And you can't do all those things at the same time. And so I think trying to figure out what is the balance, what's the most important thing for our family, and my husband and I have these discussions all the time. What's the most important thing for us, right now? What's the most important part of our family? What's, our faith is most important than our family, and making sure that we're setting up our family for success in the future. So what does that mean in terms of trade-offs right now. So I make decisions in my career that maybe set me up for future success in some ways, but also allow me to prioritize my family in other ways. And so I think trying to figure out what that looks like is kind of a continuing process. But I think it's tough when young people are told, oh, you can have it all, or you should have it all, or your life should look like this. And I think it puts a level of stress on people that's unrealistic. And I think also just taking ownership of, I'm making decisions now that I know always have trade-offs. Every decision has a trade-off, right? So I'm giving up one thing to hopefully have something better and trying to keep that long goal in mind.
Do you think that more pressure is put on young women to have it all? Because I know that discussion has sort of opened up for women in sort of a new way in the last decade. Do you think that there's a gender difference in how that all gets processed?
I think there can be to some extent. I think because of the different demands that are on time for men and women, and I think oftentimes the pressure that gets put on women is to be the Pinterest mom, the Pinterest room mom, everything, all of those types of things. And so I think trying to understand where you can do those things and where you can't is really important. I think having people in your life that help keep you grounded and remind. I mean, my husband does that for me all the time. It's like, you can't do all those things. It's okay. It's okay if you're not the one that gets the Christmas ribbons tied on the juice boxes for the 5-year-old Christmas party this time, or it's okay if you have to say no to certain things to have things that are better. But I do think especially women hear a lot of that, or at least they want to be all of those things, and it is hard because they're good things. They're all great things, but trying to figure out what that looks like, and then keep in mind that the decisions that I'm making don't just affect me, they affect my husband and my kids, and what's best for us as a family is really important.
Right. And then in terms of the research itself, what are you working on right now besides hookers and hitmen, fracking banks, all that stuff?
Nothing quite as exciting as hookers and hitmen anymore, I don't think. But the project that I'm working on a couple different things right now. Most of my projects look at kind of insurance and banking industry. So I have one project that I'm looking actually with one of my Mays colleagues, Matt Aggie, where we're looking at insurance companies, and the insurance companies have a big estimate that they get to say how much do we think we're going to lose on this estimate, and we're actually seeing that they're kind of manipulate those estimates around profit thresholds. So if there was an estimate that was 100% correct, they would have reported a loss, but somehow they ended up reporting a profit by the error in that estimate. And there's prior research that's shown they do this, but we've actually been able to kind of provide some evidence that suggests that they're using actuaries and other services to help support that particular estimate. So they're really doing a lot of kind of manipulation of those estimates. So I think that's a pretty interesting one. Hopefully a referee or reviewer will think that as well.
Sure.
So I think that one is interesting. And then the one that I kind of alluded to earlier, looking at sort of banks' lending responses to auditors.
Yes.
And what we're finding in that one, actually also with Matt Aggie here at Mays. We've got a lot of great co-authors here. But
yeah.
Where if the auditor kind of tightens down scrutiny, the bank shifts how they lend. And it ends up kind of reducing the lending to low-income borrowers in some ways. So it actually has a negative impact on those types of borrowers as banks shift to try to regain discretion in their estimates. It ends up, the evidence, at least early on in our paper, suggests that it sort of restricts some low-income lending in response to the actions of the tighter auditor scrutiny.
Conceptually, it sort of makes sense that as you tighten scrutiny, that the subject of the scrutiny would become more conservative in some way. But the idea that does a disservice to a lower income audience, if you will, it's unfortunate. What generally leads to the tighter scrutiny in the first place? Like if an auditor is tightening down on something, what's the most common situation that kicks this off in the first place?
So what we're really looking at in this one, and it's building off actually one of my earlier studies that looks at the audit regulator. So the primary audit regulator is the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, the PCAOB. So they come in and inspect audit firms. And when
the PCAOB?
That sounds better than PCAOB. We should also introduce that. We're going to name all kinds of new stuff today. But they come in and they'll do inspections of audit engagements and say, oh, you're not doing this well, you need to change your procedures. And in an earlier paper, that I have with my dissertation advisor, we found that, well, when they do that, banks tend to just get more conservative, but not more accurate. Their financial statements actually just kind of get more biased in a conservative direction. And so what this paper kind of starts off where that one leads and says, as they respond to this PCAOB scrutiny, they're getting more conservative, but they don't want to necessarily be more conservative. They want flexibility. So they adjust how they're lending away from mortgage type loans to other loans where they have more flexibility in estimating losses and things like that. And then that flows down through those types of borrowers. So that was probably a longer winded answer than you wanted but in response to auditor scrutiny, really is the auditor strictness is the PCAOB kind of driver there.
I see. What about Good Bull?
I think Good Bull today would go to my husband. He is amazing in lots of different things. He's done a lot of really neat things in his life. He was in the Air Force for a time period. He had a construction management career. Now he's a rock star, stay-at-home dad with our kids. And what he does at home and providing stability and leadership for our family gives me courage to come out and tackle my research, tackle my teaching, and do those sorts of things. So be Good Bull to my husband, Micah.
Well, Good Bull to Micah and Good Bull to you. Thanks for coming to speak with us today, Sarah.
Thanks.